My name is Adrian Cole. I am 26 years old, and tonight I am sitting in the third chair of the elder table at the Ashford New Year banquet, while 82 people pretend not to look at me. The right in this house is older than the money. The teapot travels down the table by rank. Nobody under 30 drinks until every elder has been served, and nobody in this family pours for themselves. 2 years ago, I stood in the rain outside these gates with a box of my own pens in my arms. Tonight, the house manager took my coat with both hands and called me sir. I still do not know where to put my knees. The woman beside me is Vivian Ashford. She is 31, she runs the freight company, she signs every check this family cashes, and 11 days ago, she married me at a county office with 2 clerks as witnesses. She notices that I am sitting like a man waiting for a bus. Without looking up, she puts 2 fingers on my wrist and presses my hand flat to the table. Sit like you own the chair, she says. You do. At the head sits Margaret Ashford, grandmother, 84 years old, black cane, and the family ledger in a green book that never leaves this house. She has been writing in it since before I was born. The rule of the first cup is short. Whoever the green book says is senior gets the first cup. Blood or marriage, the book does not care. It is the only thing in this house that has never lied to me. Across from me sits Gregory Ashford, Vivian's older brother, master of the North Yard, and a man who has wanted his sister's seat for 9 years. He looks at my sleeve the way you look at a stain. Nice suit, Gregory says. Whose is it? Vivian answers without turning her head. Mine, she says. I paid $9,000 for it. Is there a second question, or are we done with the fabric? The hall laughs the way people laugh when they are afraid of 2 things at once. I feel my ears go hot. I want to say something clever, and instead I drink water and burn my tongue on it. 3 tables, 82 guests, 11 minutes for the tea right, because grandmother times it with a small brass clock and has thrown people out for rushing. I counted the chairs twice while waiting. There is 1 empty chair at the second table. It has a folded napkin standing up like a little white tent, which in this house means the guest is late and everyone is expected to notice. I know exactly whose chair it is. My hands know before my head does. My palms go cold, and my thumb starts rubbing the edge of the table like it is trying to sand it down. Then the doors open. The rite started 40 minutes late because grandmother finally stopped waiting, and the pot is already at the second table when Camille Ashford walks in laughing at something the man behind her has just said. She is 25. She is wearing white, which is a color you do not wear to a New Year table in this family. And she wears it because nobody has ever told her no and lived comfortably afterward. The man behind her is Ethan Ward, 28, my friend for 6 years, the best man I would have chosen, the man whose hand was inside her coat in a parking garage on the 3rd of November. The hall goes quiet in stages. First the second table, then the third, then the old ones who never stop talking. Camille is still laughing when she reaches her chair and looks up at the elder table. Her laugh stops in the middle. Not at the end. In the middle, so half of it is still in her mouth with nowhere to go. Her eyes hit me and stay, and her hand goes to the back of the chair for balance. I watch her mouth make my name without any sound in it. Adrian. Then she says it out loud, and the whole room hears exactly how loud it comes out. Adrian, what are you doing at that table? I put my cup down. My heart is hammering hard enough that I can hear it in my ears. And I am ashamed of that, because I have been rehearsing this moment for 11 days, and my body did not get the memo. You are late, I say. 41 minutes, grandmother times it. Camille does not hear a word of that. She turns to her father and points at me with 2 fingers, like she is reporting a dog in the house. Get him out, she says. This is a family table. Gregory is already standing. He is a big man, and he uses it. He comes around the corner of the table with his napkin still in his fist. Son, Gregory says, you took a wrong turn at the gate. I stay in my chair. Somewhere under the table, Vivian's hand closes around my wrist again, and this time she is holding on to it. Sit down, Vivian says. She does not raise her voice. She says it the way you tell a driver which street to take. Gregory keeps walking. Ethan is watching from the doorway with his coat still on. Then, the brass end of the cane comes down on the floor. Once. Grandmother Margaret does not stand and does not shout. She taps the parquet, and Gregory stops between 2 tables like a man who hit glass. Gregory, grandmother says, you are standing during the tea. Sit. Gregory sits. 82 people watch a man of 53 fold himself back into a chair because an old woman tapped a floor. Camille tries again, softer, the way she used to talk to me when she wanted the last word to sound like kindness. Grandmother, she says, that is Adrian Cole. He is a clerk. He was fired from our company. Grandmother opens the green book. The sound of that cover is the loudest thing in the room. She turns 2 pages with one finger, and I watch every head in that hall follow her finger like a metronome. She reads out loud, Vivian Margaret Ashford, married the 7th of this month at the county office on Senate Street. Spouse, Adrian Cole, entered in my hand, witnessed by 2 clerks and by me. Nobody breathes. Ethan's coat is still on. Camille's mouth has gone completely flat. Grandmother closes the book and looks at her granddaughter with the patience of a woman who has buried a husband. Which makes him, grandmother says, your aunt's husband, which makes him your uncle by marriage, which makes him senior to you at this table by 2 full ranks, and you are pouring tonight. Camille laughs. It comes out wrong, high and short, and dies in the middle again. That is a joke, she says. Grandmother taps the floor once more. In this house, I do not make jokes about the book. I sit there with my hands in my lap, and the strangest thing happens inside my chest. It does not feel like winning. It feels like a door opening in a house I was thrown out of, and me being afraid to walk in. Pot comes up the table. It reaches the last of the second rank, and then the little maid in the gray apron does exactly what the right says. She carries it around and sets it down in front of Ethan Ward. Ethan has not sat down yet. He is still in the doorway, with his coat over his arm and an expression that is trying to be amused. Grandmother looks at him without any particular feeling. Young man, she says, you are engaged to Camille. Engagement is entered in the book on the 2nd of December, so tonight you are junior, and junior's poor. Uncle Adrian takes his tea with nothing in it. I hear the word uncle land in that hall, like a plate dropping in a kitchen. Somebody at the 3rd table coughs into a napkin. Camille's little sister Nina, who is 17, drops her fork on purpose. Ethan walks up the length of the room, 22 steps. I count them because counting is what my head does when it does not want to feel anything, and because every one of those steps used to be mine. He lifts the pot. His hand is not steady. He tips it, and the tea goes into my cup and over the rim, and a line of it runs down the porcelain and touches his thumb, and he flinches and says a bad word. The whole hall hears the bad word too. Grandmother's cane taps. Language, she says. Ethan's face goes the color of raw pork. He straightens up, and now he has to finish it, and he knows he has to finish it. Uncle, Ethan says. His voice cracks on the second half of the word. Please accept the tea. My friend of 6 years is standing over me with a scalded thumb, calling me uncle in front of 82 people. I look at his hand on the handle. I look at the little red mark coming up on his thumb. Then I do the small thing I have been rehearsing for 11 days. Thank you, I say. I take the cup with both hands the way the right says a senior takes it, and I drink. It tastes like tea. It is the best cup of tea I have had in my entire life, and it tastes like tea. Ethan goes back to his seat. He does not look at Camille. Camille is looking at him with her whole face asking a question he is not answering, and I file that away because it is going to matter later. Now the pot has to go to me from her side of the table too, because that is how the right runs. Every junior of that branch serves every senior. Camille Ashford has to stand up and pour for me by name. She does not stand. Grandmother waits. The brass clock on the sideboard ticks and the room listens to it. 11 minutes is the right. We are at 7. Nobody in this family has ever been on the clock like this. I could stop it, and that is what is strange. One sentence from me and grandmother would let it go, because a senior can wave the cup, and every person in this hall knows that a senior can wave the cup. I think about a night in November on the shoulder of the airport road, standing in the rain with a box in my arms and my mother's shop keys down in the bottom of it, watching Camille's taillights get small. I do not wave the cup. Camille stands up. She takes the pot. She walks around the table, and her heels are loud because the room is silent, and she stops beside my chair close enough that I can smell her perfume, which has not changed. You look ridiculous in that chair, she says under her breath. Only I hear it. She smiles at the hall while she says it. She always could do that. Put a knife in a sentence and hand you the flowers with it. Then she pours. Her hand shakes on the second half, and the tea goes over the rim, over the saucer, over the tablecloth, and a hot line of it runs into my sleeve and soaks the cuff of my shirt. The hall makes a sound, not a gasp, a kind of low, ugly murmur, because in this house, tea on a senior's sleeve is not clumsiness. It is an insult with a name and a fine attached to it in the green book. Grandmother says one word, kneel. Camille's head comes up like she has been slapped. Gregory starts to rise again, and the cane taps, and he sits again, and I watch a 53-year-old man learn nothing. I say, no. Everyone looks at me. Grandmother looks at me longest. Let her finish standing, I say. She has to pour for 11 more people tonight, and I would rather she got through it on her feet. It is the meanest thing I have ever said out loud, and I say it in a completely pleasant voice. Camille's ears go red. Nina, at the third table, is filming under the tablecloth and doing a bad job of hiding it. Camille pours the rest of the elder table, 11 cups. I count them for her, out loud, in my head, and by the 8th, her wrist is trembling from holding the pot at that angle for that long. When she is done, she goes back to her chair and sits very straight. Ethan puts a hand on her arm. She takes her arm back. I file that away too, next to the first thing, in the drawer where I keep useful facts. The right ends at 10 minutes and 40 seconds. Grandmother stops the brass clock with one finger and says the sentence she says every year. The table is fed, the ranks are kept, the year may start. And then, because the year has started, the family gets down to what it actually came here to do, which is money. And Gregory has been waiting the entire meal for exactly this moment. Insat, iksabuetans iksay, ehieren states. Stands up with his glass. Since we are all admiring the new arrival, he says, perhaps the new arrival will tell us what he brought into this family besides an appetite. Vivian sets down her glass. I put my hand on her wrist under the table, the way she did to me, and I feel her go still with surprise. I want to answer this one myself. I have been waiting 2 years to answer it. Nothing, I say. I brought nothing. I signed a paper 11 days ago at the county office, and there are 4 pages of it, and the 4th page is the one you want to read out loud. So read it out loud, sir. Gregory does not have the paper. Grandmother does, because everything in this family passes through the green book. She lifts a folded sheet out of the back cover and hands it down the table to him. I know the page by heart, so I say it while he unfolds it. Clause 4. In the event of dissolution, the party named Adrian Cole waives all claim to Ashford Holdings, shares, property, and income. Waives all claim, I say again, not a reduced claim. I get my clothes and the $1,200 in my own bank account. Read it, sir. My handwriting is on the bottom and it is not shaky. Gregory reads it. His mouth moves. He is a man who has spent 9 years explaining to this table that his sister let strangers into the house, and he is holding 4 pages that say the stranger asked for 0. Why? Camille says suddenly. She says it loud, down the whole length of the hall. Why would you sign that? Every eye comes off the paper and onto me, and hers are shining, and I hate how well I know that shine. Because your aunt asked me for something, I say, and it was not money. I do not say what it was. I do not say it because I am not sure yet myself, and because Vivian's hand has gone tight on my wrist. Grandmother takes the paper back. She looks at me over the top of it for a long moment, with a face like a closed door. Then she asks a question that has nothing to do with anything, or so it sounds. Boy, she says, you worked 3 years in the contracts room downtown before they threw you out. Tell me, what is the number of the clause that lets us renew a harbor lease at the original rate? The hall does not understand why she is asking. Gregory understands. I watch him understand, and I watch the blood leave the top of his face while the bottom of it keeps smiling out of habit. Clause 4, I say. Page 9 of the Port Authority Standard, filed by my father-in-law in the spring, 30-year term, renewal at $200,000 a year if the letter goes in 90 days before. 90 days, grandmother says. And when does the lease on the 9th pier end? The 3rd of April, I say, which means the letter has to be at the Port Authority window by 4 in the afternoon on the 2nd of January. That is 15 days from tonight, I say. Vivian Ashford turns her head and looks at me, fully, for the first time all evening, and maybe for the first time since the county office on Senate Street with the 2 board clerks. She is looking at me the way a woman looks at a tool she went out and bought on purpose, on the day the tool does exactly what she paid for. Banquet breaks up the way these things do, in knots of people who all want to be the last one talking to grandmother. I go to find my coat because I still cannot make myself ask a person to bring it. Ethan is standing by the coat rack with his thumb wrapped in a napkin. He has been waiting for me. 6 years of friendship, and I can still read the shape of his shoulders from 20 steps away. Adrian, he says. He tries a laugh. That was a hell of a thing in there. His thumb is red and shiny. I look at it and feel absolutely nothing, which surprises me because I expected to feel good. You came in late, I say. You knew the rite starts at 7. He shrugs and the napkin comes loose. She wanted to make an entrance, he says. You know how she is. And there it is, the old trick. You know how she is. He used to say that to me for 2 years while he was driving her home. He is saying it to me now, like we are still on the same side of it, like we are two men discussing weather. Then he asks his question, and he asks it too fast. The old contracts room, he says. When they cleared it out, did you keep anything? Any of the files? Any of the working copies? Take my coat off the hook. Why, I say, he says. No reason, and his eyes go to the door twice while he says it. 2 years I have been trying to understand who did that to me. He just answered. I do not tell him that. I say goodnight and I walk, and behind me, he says my name once more and I keep walking. And it is one of the best feelings I have had since the rain on the airport road. Camille catches me in the corridor by the garden doors. She steps into my path with her arms folded and her chin up, exactly the way she used to when she was about to explain to me what I had done wrong. You humiliated me, she says, in front of my whole family on New Year. I say, you poured tea. She says, you made me pour tea. There is a difference, and you know there is a difference. There is, I say. The difference is 41 minutes and a white dress. She flinches. Then she does the thing I have been dreading since her heels started down that corridor. She changes her voice. Adrian, she says softer. Your mother would be so disappointed in you. My mother has been dead for 3 years. My mother ran a dry cleaning shop on Bell Street for 19 years and never raised her voice. Camille knows all of that, which is why she said it. She watches my face for the crack. I feel it happen in my throat, in the middle of my chest, that hot, ugly pull, and I stand there and let it go through me. My mother is not in this house, I say. My mother is in the ground at Elmridge, and I have been paying $80 a month on her stone since the company fired me for a leak I did not do. Move. She moves. She does not expect me to say the number out loud. Nobody in this family ever says the small numbers out loud, and the small numbers are the only ones I have ever had. The car is a long black thing, with a driver named Owen who calls me sir and holds the door. I get in and sit with my hands on my knees like a boy at a dentist. Vivian gets in and takes off her earrings. Well, she says, that went better than I planned. I turn my head. You planned that, she says. I planned some of that. Grandmother did the rest. Grandmother enjoys the right more than she enjoys people. I say, why did you marry me? Owen puts up the glass without being asked, which tells me Owen has been in this family a long time. Vivian puts her earrings in a little bag and takes her time. The lease on the 9th pier, she says. 30-year term signed by my father, ends the 3rd of April. Renewal at $200,000 a year if we file the letter by the 2nd of January. $200,000, she says, on a pier that the Halloran Group has offered the Port Authority $900,000 a year for, the day it goes back on the market. Do you follow the arithmetic? Everything moves through the 9th pier, I say. Cold storage, the ferry contract, the whole North Run. She nods once. 61% of our freight, she says. If we lose the pier, we do not lose a pier. Then she says the thing I have been waiting for without knowing it. To file the letter, the Port Authority wants the original filing number and a certified copy of page 9. Page 9 is gone from our file. On, I say. She says, gone since the spring 2 years ago. The whole folder was signed out of the contracts room, and when it came back, page 9 was not in it, and neither were you by then. I sit there in the dark of that car and feel the shape of it come together. Somebody took page 9, I say, and somebody made sure the clerk who read the folder every week was fired first. Vivian says, yes, that is what I think. I have 12 lawyers, and every one of them tells me to sue the Port Authority in April and lose slowly. Then I found out who used to file that folder. She looks straight ahead. I went to the storage yard on Bell Street where you were unloading trucks for $16 an hour, she says. I stood there for 11 minutes and watched you work. Why not just hire me? I say. My voice comes out thin. She says, because a hired clerk is a witness the other side can buy for $40,000, and a husband is a witness they have to kill. That is the coldest thing anyone has ever said to me. And it is also, I realize, with my ears going hot, the first time in 2 years a person has told me I am worth being sure about. So this is a job, I say. She says, this is a marriage on paper with a job inside it. Then she looks over. And if you want it to be less than that, you tell me. I do not want a husband who feels bought. I say, I signed away everything. $1,200 in my account. What exactly could I be bought with? Vivian almost smiles. It is a very small movement at one corner, and it is gone in half a second. The house is worse than the banquet. It is white and enormous, and every room sounds like a swimming pool. Mr. Bell, the house manager, takes my coat and asks what I would like laid out for breakfast. I say, Whatever there is. He looks pained. Sir, he says, there is whatever you say there is. I panic and ask for toast. 2 slices. Mr. Bell writes it down in a little book like I have given him a mission. At dinner the next evening, they bring a fish with the head still on. I stare at it. It stares at me. I have been in this house for 1 day, and I am about to be defeated by a fish in front of 6 staff. Vivian, without looking up from her phone, reaches over with her own fork and knife, takes the fish apart in 4 movements, puts the good side on my plate, and slides the head end away. Nobody at this table says anything. Mr. Bell develops a sudden interest in the ceiling. I eat my fish. My ears are on fire. It is the nicest thing anybody has done for me in 3 years, and it was about a fish. Later, she takes me into the office on the 2nd floor and gives me a key card, a badge with my name on it, and a room with a desk that has nothing on it. This is yours, she says. Fill it with paper. I need to tell you the rules, I say, because you are counting on my head and you should know what my head can and cannot do. She sits on the edge of the desk and folds her arms. Go on. I remember paper I have touched, I say. If it went through my hands in the contracts room, I have it. Clause numbers, dates, filing stamps. The order pages sit in a folder. I have never lost one. And what I never touched, I do not have, I say. I was fired on the 9th of March 2 years ago. Anything that came into that room after the 9th of March might as well be written in Chinese. Vivian says, that is a narrow tool. I say, it is the tool that filed your father's harbor lease every spring for 3 years, and I can tell you what was clipped to the front of it. A yellow courier slip. She goes very still. Say that again, she says. A yellow courier slip, I say. Every time the folder left the room, it got a slip. Name, date, signature. 2 carbon copies. 1 stays in the courier book. Where's the courier book? She says. I say, the company keeps it 7 years by law. It is in the North Yard archive. Vivian puts down her phone and calls the North Yard archive at 9 at night. The archive tells her that as of this morning, by order of Gregory Ashford, the archive is closed for what they are calling an inventory. Estimated duration, 60 days. The lease dies in 14. I watch my wife's face while she listens to that. She does not shout. She says thank you, hangs up, and stands there with her hand flat on the desk, and I see her jaw go tight for exactly 1 second. He knows, she says. I say, he knew before tonight. He went white at that table when grandmother asked me the clause number. He was not surprised that I knew it. He was surprised that I was alive in that chair. Meanwhile, in a house on the north side of the river, Gregory Ashford pours himself something brown and makes 2 calls, and both of them are about a clerk he had thrown out of a building 2 years ago. Nina texts me at 11 at night. She is 17, she is Camille's sister, and she has sent me the video of the tea right with 41 crying, laughing faces after it. Uncle, she writes. Uncle. She has put it in the family group chat, which has 90 members, which includes 3 great aunts and a bishop. I tell her to take it down. She replies with a picture of a cat saying no. Then she sends one more line, and it stops being funny. She writes, my dad says the North Yard is burning old files this week, and he told the drivers not to talk about it. Do you want me to go look? I write back, no. Do not go anywhere near that yard. She writes, boring. Then she writes, okay. Then she writes, Camille cried in the car and Ethan did not touch her once the whole way home. I sit on the edge of a bed the size of my mother's whole shop, and I think about the courier book burning in a barrel in the North Yard. And I understand that we are not going to win this with lawyers. In the morning, I go to the Port Authority building on the Harbor Road. It is gray. It smells like wet paper. And the clerk at the window is a man of about 60 with a cardigan and no patience. I say, I would like the microfilm of a lease filed in the spring, 30-year term, 9th pier. He says, filing number. I say, the filing number is what I am trying to find. He says, then no. I say it another way. Every filed lease has a stamp with a filing number, and every stamp gets copied onto the invoice the Port Authority sends for the filing fee. He says, so bring me the invoice. I do not have the invoice, but I remember it. $460 paid by company check in the spring, and I remember the stamp on the back because I put the whole thing in the folder myself. Then I remember something better, and my mouth goes dry. I did not put the invoice in the folder. The invoice was a duplicate, and duplicates went in the clerk copybook, and the clerk copybook was mine. I carried that copybook out of the building in a cardboard box on the 9th of March in the rain, with 2 security men walking beside me, and I know exactly where I put the box that night. Bell Street. The basement of my mother's shop. I call Vivian from the steps of the Port Authority, and she does not ask a single question. She says, Owen is 4 minutes away, and then she says, Adrian, and I say what? And she says, eat something. Bell Street has not changed, except that everything has changed. The shop is a phone repair place now. Yellow sign. The awning my mother paid $900 for is gone, and there is a plastic one. A young guy with a lanyard tells me the basement is his storage, and he does not know anything about any boxes. I ask if there was anything down there when he took the lease. He says, a lot of junk. What happened to the junk? I say. He says the landlord had it cleared out about 2 months ago. A man came with a van and took the whole lot, and he was very particular about the paper. I ask what the man looked like. He says, tall guy, nice coat, real friendly. Left a card in case anything else turned up. He goes and gets it from a drawer and hands it to me, and I read the name. Ethan Ward. I sit in the car with that card in my hand for a long time. Owen does not start the engine. On the card, it says consulting, which is a word men use when they do not want to write down what they do. Vivian takes the card, reads it, and hands it back. She does not say, are you sure? She does not say, maybe there is an explanation. She says, when did your mother's shop close? And I say, 3 years ago. So he went to a basement on Bell Street 2 months ago, she says, and paid a man with a van for boxes belonging to a dead woman whose son had already been thrown away. That is not a nervous man. That is a man doing maintenance, she says. My hands are shaking. I put them under my legs so she will not see. She sees. She reaches over and takes one out and holds it in both of hers on the seat between us. Let us go and take it back, I say, right now. He lives on Curran Street. The door code is the day Camille was born. I have been in that apartment 40 times. Vivian says one word, no. If you knock on that door tonight, she says, the paper is in a barrel by morning. He does not need to hide it. He only needs to burn it. You cannot punch a man who is holding the thing you need. Then what do we do? I say. She says, we make him think it is somewhere else. And I sit there and feel something in my chest go quiet and clean because for the first time, somebody is fighting on my side. Grandmother sends for me the next day, not for Vivian. For me, the house on the hill in daylight is even bigger and even colder, and the green book is on the table in front of her, closed. She points at a chair with the cane. Sit. Then she says, what do you want, boy? Not what do you need. What do you want? I have learned in this family that the two words are priced very differently. I want to read the North Yard archive, I say. She says no before I finish. The North Yard is Gregory's under the division of 1991, she says, and I do not break my own divisions for a son-in-law of 11 days. Then she opens the book to the back and turns it around so I can see. There is a line at the bottom of every year, and it is blank, and it has been blank for 6 years running. That line is for whoever paid the family's largest debt that year, she says. It is written last, on the night of the summer banquet. Whoever stands on that line is senior at the table to every soul below it. You mean I could sit above your son, I say. She says, I mean you could sit above everyone at that table who has not paid what you paid. Then she closes the book. Bring me paper. I do not take mouths as evidence. At the company, they give me a badge and a floor pass and a room on the 4th floor, and every person on that floor knows exactly who I am. Because in a freight company, gossip moves faster than freight. 2 years ago, I was walked out of this building by 2 security men. Today, one of those men holds the elevator for me and says, good morning, sir, and does not remember my face at all, which is somehow worse. The contracts room is on the 4th floor at the end. It smells the same, paper and warm dust, and the cheap lemon stuff they use on the linoleum. I stand in the doorway and my legs will not go in. Delia Fenn still works here. She is 50, she trained me, she taught me to check a filing stamp against the fee invoice, and on the 9th of March, 2 years ago, she watched them walk me out and said nothing. She comes over with 2 coffees and she cannot look at me. Adrian, she says. I did not know what to say back then. I say, you could have said he never touched that bid. She says, I know. They told us it was you and they told us fast, she says. It was in the room by 10 in the morning and you were gone by noon, and the ones who fired you were gone to lunch by 1. I have thought about it since. Outranks take the coffee. I do not forgive her out loud because I am not there yet, and because Delia Fenn is going to owe me a sentence in front of witnesses one day, and I want that sentence to still cost her something. I ask her one question, in the spring 2 years ago, who signed the yellow slip when the harbor folder went out of this room. She says, I do not know. Then she says, but I know we use Kestrel for everything. Kestrel Courier, I say. Yes, she says. Their drivers came at 4 every day. Yellow slips, 2 carbons, and I stand there in that doorway with cold coffee in my hand while the whole thing lays itself out flat. The courier keeps a driver log, I say. 7 years by law, same as us. Delia nods slowly. And the courier is not in this family, I say. And Gregory Ashford cannot close a company he does not own. Camille comes to my floor at 4 in the afternoon. Of course she does. She is wearing something soft and expensive, and she has 2 coffees, and she has practiced her face in an elevator mirror. Can we talk like adults? She says. I say, you have 10 minutes. She sits on the corner of my desk the way she used to sit on the corner of everything, and she looks around at my empty office and pities me. You are being used, she says. Aunt Vivian did not marry you. She bought a witness. She needs someone from the old contracts room, and you were cheap. Do you honestly think a woman like that wants you? I say nothing. It works better than talking. She keeps going, because she always keeps going. Then she says, what are you even looking for? And there it is. That is what the coffee was for. I let my eyes go to the door like a bad liar. The courier book, I say. In the north yard. The one with the yellow slip carbons. If I get an hour in that archive, I will have the name of whoever pulled page 9. Camille goes very still. Then she says, that archive is closed. I say, archive's open. She stands up, she says she has to go, and she leaves her coffee on my desk, untouched, still hot, which tells me everything. I watch her from the window. She is on her phone before she reaches her car, and she talks with one hand cutting the air, and she is not calling her father, because she calls her father with her arm down. That night, the North Yard burns 9 boxes of courier books in a barrel behind the loading dock, and 3 drivers stand in the cold and watch, and one of them takes a photograph because drivers are not stupid. I did not send them there. I only told the truth about a room I do not need, and let 2 people set fire to their own alibi, and I would be lying if I said I did not enjoy hearing about the smell. In the morning, Vivian puts the photograph on the breakfast table next to my toast. 2 slices, exactly as ordered, because Mr. Bell writes things down. She says, you did that on purpose. I say, yes. She sits down across from me and looks at me for a while. You're more dangerous than you look, she says. I say, that is the only kind of dangerous a clerk gets to be. And she laughs. It is the first time I have heard it. It is short and low, and it stops fast, like she has caught herself doing something unprofessional. And I sit there holding a piece of toast like an idiot. Then the good morning ends, because Tess, her assistant, comes in with a tablet and says the name Kestrel Courier, and then says the second half, which is that Kestrel was bought 2 years ago. Bought by whom? Vivian says. Tess says Halloran Freight Holdings, in the summer 2 years ago, 4 months after the Kestrel container bid leaked, and we lost it by $11 million. I put down the toast. Say the dates again, I say. Tess says them again. Vivian is already standing, and her voice has gone into the register I heard at the banquet, the one that stops big men walking. He did not just buy a courier, she says. He bought the only company that carries our paper across town. He has been reading our mail for 2 years and paying a courier company for the privilege. And Desmond Halloran wants the 9th pier, I say, at $900,000 a year, and he has wanted it since before I was fired, which means the leak was not a leak. It was a test of the plumbing. Vivian says, and someone inside this family was holding the wrench. Then she says, get your coat. We are going to a courier company. I say, they will not give us anything. She says, I am aware. They do not give us anything. A polite young man at Kestrel says, driver logs are internal records, and their counsel advises against release without a court order. And he says it the way a person reads a card. Vivian asks for the counsel's name. He gives it. It is a firm that also represents Halloran. She thanks him. In the car, she says nothing for 9 blocks, and then she says 11 days. 11 days until the 2nd of January. And the Port Authority window closes at 4 in the afternoon that day. And after 4 in the afternoon, the 9th pier goes on the open market in April. That evening, Ethan Ward sits in a wine bar on Curran Street with his phone face down and tells Camille Ashford that her uncle is going through boxes and that it would be very useful to know which boxes. Camille says, he is not my uncle. Ethan says he is, by the book, and he says it with a smile that does not go anywhere near his eyes. Then he asks her to find out what is in the house on the hill. You want me to search my grandmother's house, Camille says. Ethan says, I want you to be helpful. There is a small pause there, and in that pause, Camille Ashford hears the price of everything she chose. At 10 at night, my phone lights up with a message from Nina. It is a photograph taken through a chain-link fence, the north yard, two men rolling a barrel, bright orange fire, black smoke going sideways. Under it, she has written, "I found the second archive, the one under the way station. They are moving it tonight. And there are green books down here. Uncle, there are books with our name on them." I am already on my feet. I call her. It rings out. I call again. It rings out. I write, "Nina, get out of that yard right now." And I stand in a white room the size of a church, watching one gray tick. And the second tick comes, and then 3 dots, and then they stop, and then nothing comes at all. The north yard is 22 minutes from the house, if you obey the lights. Owen does it in 15, and does not ask me a single question. And I will remember that about Owen for the rest of my life. The gate is chained. There is a gap by the drainage ditch where the fence has been cut for years, because every yard in this city has a hole that the drivers use and the owners do not know about. I know about this one because I used to walk through it with sandwiches when I was a clerk, and the loaders were nice to me. I go through it in a suit that cost $9,000, and I do not care. The fire is still going in the barrel. The smell hits me first, hot paper and something chemical, and under the lights by the way station, there are 11 boxes stacked on a pallet jack. I see the shipping tags on the boxes before I see anything else, and I have to stop and breathe. They are Halloran tags, red and white. The family archive is packed and labeled to leave the family. Then I hear a girl say, "Let go of me," in a voice that is trying very hard to sound like an adult and failing. And every other thought I have goes out of my head like water out of a sink. Nina is by the way station door with a night guard holding her upper arm. She is 17. She is wearing a school coat. She has her phone in her free hand, and she is still filming, which is my girl. The guard is not a bad man. I can see that in 3 seconds. He is a tired man on a night shift who has been told to keep people out and has just caught a teenager, and he does not know what to do with her. I say, "Sir, that is Gregory Ashford's daughter and my niece, and you are holding her hard enough to leave marks, and in about 4 minutes you are going to have to explain those marks to her grandmother." He lets go so fast that Nina almost falls. I put her behind me. My hands are shaking again, and this time it is not fear, it is the other thing, the hot one, and I have to stand still until it passes. Then a second man comes out of the dark, and this one is not tired. He puts his forearm across my chest and walks me back 4 steps, and my heel goes into the ditch, and I go down on the gravel. My palm opens on the stones. My knee takes the rest. Nina screams a word I did not know she had. I get up because getting up is the only thing I have ever been good at, and my hand is bleeding. "Take the pictures," I say to her. "Not of me, of the boxes. Get the tags. Get the barrel." Nina lifts her phone with both hands like it is a brick, and she takes 11 pictures before anybody thinks to stop her. Then the floodlights come on, and Gregory Ashford walks out of the office trailer in a coat over pajamas, and I have never been so glad to see anyone in my life, because now there are witnesses on both sides. He looks at the fire. He looks at his daughter. He looks at me on the gravel with my hand bleeding into my sleeve, and I watch him make a decision in about a second and a half, and it is the wrong one. "Call the police," Gregory says. "There is a man on my property," I say. "There is a girl on your property too, and she is yours." He says, "She is a child who was brought here by you." Nina says, "That is a lie," and she says it loud enough that 2 drivers by the gate turn around. Gregory does not even look at her. He says it again to the guard, slower. "He brought her here." That is the moment I stop being angry at Gregory Ashford and start being something colder, because I can survive a man who wants my wife's chair. I cannot forgive a man who puts a lie on his own daughter to get it. Police come. They are polite and bored. There is a chain-link fence with a hole in it, and a man in a good suit sitting on a bumper with a torn hand, and none of it fits any box on their form. I spend 3 hours in a room that smells like burned coffee. Nobody hits me. Nobody shouts. A young officer asks me twice how I got the cut and writes down gravel, and I sign a paper about the fence. At 2 in the morning, the door opens and my wife is standing in it, in a coat over pajama trousers, with her hair pushed back, with no makeup, and she looks about 19 and absolutely murderous. Behind her is a lawyer named Hargrove who talks for 6 minutes without stopping. Then a sergeant says the word released and hands me back my belt, my keys, and 1 cufflink, having lost the other. In the car, Vivian does not speak until we are on the bridge. Then she says, "You climbed through a fence." I say, "Yes." She says, at night, on your brother-in-law's yard, with your name on my company badge. Yes, I say. She says, do you know what he can do with that? And I say, he already did it, and I would do it again, because he had a 17-year-old girl by the arm, and I would climb worse fences. Vivian goes quiet. Then she reaches over without looking, and takes my bad hand, and turns it over, and looks at the gauze the paramedic put on it, and she holds it in her lap for the rest of the bridge. At the house, Mr. Bell is up. It is 3 in the morning, and he is fully dressed. He takes one look at my hand and says, I shall get the good kit, sir, in a voice like a man declaring war on a scratch. Cleans it at the kitchen table with the concentration of a bomb technician. Dorothy the cook comes down in a dressing gown and puts a pot on without being asked. Owen sits on a stool and says nothing. Nobody in that kitchen asks me if I did anything wrong. I sit there with my hand out, and 4 people I have known for 11 days behaving like family, and my eyes go hot and I have to look at the ceiling. Vivian comes back in with her phone. Grandmother has called a family council, she says. Tomorrow at 11, Gregory has petitioned to strike your name out of the book on grounds of bringing the family into disrepute. He is fast, I say. She says, he has been fast for 9 years. That is the whole problem. He is fast and he is stupid. And a stupid fast man will hand you a knife if you stand still long enough. At 11 the next morning, there are 23 chairs in the long room on the hill, and every one of them is full. Grandmother has the green book. Gregory has a folder. Camille sits behind her father in gray. Ethan Ward is there. He has no right to be in that room, and he is in it, standing at the back by the door with his hands folded, and I decide that I want him to stay for every minute of this. Gregory reads his petition. Trespass, police, a minor exposed to danger, the family name in a police file for the first time in 4 generations. He reads well. He has clearly practiced in a mirror. Then Camille stands up when her father points at her, and my chest does something stupid and small, because a piece of me is still expecting her to tell the truth, and that piece of me is an idiot. He asked me what I was looking for, she says. He told me the courier book was in the north yard. 2 nights later, he was in the north yard with my little sister. I think he used her. I think he uses everyone. Every head turns to me. Grandmother says, well, boy, speak. And I stand up in a room of 23 Ashfords with a bandage on my hand and a key ring in my pocket that has not had my mother's keys on it since November, and I speak. I say, I told exactly one person where I was going to look. Camille says, so you admit it. I say, I told one person at 4 in the afternoon in an office with a glass wall, and I told that one person a lie. The room goes very quiet. I say, I do not need the courier book. I have never needed the courier book. I said it out loud in front of one person to find out how fast a fire would start, and it started in 7 hours. Gregory says, that proves nothing, and I say, no, but the photographs do, and I hand grandmother the phone, and I do not hand her the picture of the fire first. I hand her the picture of the boxes. 11 boxes, I say, on a pallet at midnight, tagged for a truck. Turn the phone, sir, and read the tags out loud to your mother. Halloran Freight Holdings, red and white. Our archive, tagged to leave. Gregory does not read them out loud. Grandmother reads them out loud. Her voice is not loud, and every person in that room hears every syllable, and Gregory Ashford's mouth opens twice with nothing in it. Then she turns the phone and looks at the fire for a long moment. What was in the barrel, she says. Courier books, I say. 9 boxes of them. Kept by law for 7 years, burned at 11 at night in the cold. Grandmother closes the book on the table. She says, Gregory. He says, Mother, the yard was doing an inventory. She says, at 11 at night. He says, the men work at night. She says, in a barrel. Then the door at the back of the room opens, and a woman of 50 in a raincoat says, may I speak? And it is Delia Fenn, who taught me to check a filing stamp, and who watched them walk me out and said nothing. Grandmother says, who are you? Delia says, I ran the contracts room for 19 years, and I filed that harbor lease every spring, and I have wanted to say this in front of people for 2 years. Adrian Cole never touched the Kestrel bid, she says. He did not have the code for that drawer. I did. 3 people in that building had it, and he was not one of them, and I said that to nobody, and I am ashamed. The room makes a sound. Delia does not stop. On the 9th of March, she says, I was told at 10 in the morning that the leak was Adrian, and to have his desk cleared by noon. Told by a man who does not work for us. Who? Grandmother says. Delia turns around and looks at the back of the room, at the man standing by the door with his hands folded, and 23 Ashfords turn around with her. Him, she says. That one. He came up to the 4th floor twice a week for a year, and everyone let him in because he was engaged to a girl in the family and he had a courier company shirt in his car. Ethan Ward is still smiling when everyone turns. That is the thing I will remember. He is still smiling out of habit, the way a man keeps holding a glass after the party has caught fire around him. Ethan does what men like Ethan do. He walks up the middle of the room with his hands open and he tells the truth in the wrong order, which is the most dangerous kind of lying there is. I did visit the 4th floor, he says. I was engaged to Camille. I brought her lunch. He looks around at the old faces and he gives them the smile that used to work on my mother when he came to the shop. I did drive for Kestrel one summer in college, he says. I still have the shirt in a bag in my car. If owning a shirt is evidence in this family, half this room is guilty of something. It is good. It is very good. Two of the great aunts actually laugh, and Gregory's shoulders come down an inch, and I watch a room of 23 people start sliding back toward comfortable. So I ask him one question. I ask it from my chair, in the flattest voice I have, because I have learned that in this house, the quiet sentence is the one that gets heard. Ethan, I say, what was in the boxes you bought from the basement on Bell Street in November? Everything stops. The smile stays on his face for about 2 seconds after it stops being any use to him. I say, a man with a van, a landlord clearing a cellar, a very friendly gentleman who left his business card in a drawer. I hold the card up between 2 fingers. Consulting, your name printed on it. Camille turns around in her chair to look at him. That is the moment. Not the boxes, not the tags, not the fire. The moment is a girl in a gray dress turning around to look at the man she chose. Grandmother taps the floor once. Enough, she says. Then she makes her ruling, and she makes it like a woman laying out cutlery, one piece at a time, in an order that has been decided for a long while. The petition to strike the name is refused, she says. Gregory starts to speak, and the cane comes down again. Refused, she says, because a man who is thrown out of a family should first be caught doing something. Second, the Northyard archive is sealed, not closed. Sealed with my seal, tonight, by 2 people I choose. Anything that leaves that building before the summer banquet leaves over my signature. Third, she says, and now she is looking at me. You have until the 2nd of January, at 4 in the afternoon, like every other soul who deals with the Port Authority. Bring me the paper or bring me nothing. The room empties slowly, the way rooms do when nobody wants to be first through the door. I stand by the window and let it drain. My hand hurts. I have started to like the way it hurts. Camille finds me in the corridor by the garden doors in the same spot as New Year, and I think that this house has about 6 places in it where people say true things and they are all near an exit. Was it him, she says. No preamble. Her face has gone plain, and plain is the only version of her I ever actually liked. I say yes. She says prove it. I say I am going to. She says, no, prove it to me. So I tell her. I tell her the date and the drawer and the code she did not know he had. I tell her that on the 9th of March, she did not call me once. Not that day. Not that week. And that I stood at a bus stop for 2 hours. I tell her that when she left me on the airport road in the rain in November, it was raining hard enough that the box got soft and my mother's shop keys went through the bottom of it into a drain. I did not go back for them, I say. I stood there and let the keys go, and I told myself it was fine because I had you. And then 11 days after that, I saw a photograph of a parking garage. Camille starts crying. It is not the pretty crying. Her nose runs and her mouth goes square and she looks about 9 years old. I stand there and feel sorry for her, which is not what I planned to feel. I did not know he was doing that to you, she says. About the job, about the leak. I believed them. Everybody said it was you and I wanted it to be you, because if it was you, then leaving you was fine. That is the truest sentence she has ever said to me. I tell her so. Then she says, I can fix it, and reaches for my sleeve, and I step back, and her hand stays out there in the air between us. You cannot fix it, I say, and I am not the one you have to say this to. There is a woman in this family who kept a seat for you at a table on New Year, and you came in 41 minutes late in a white dress. Then I go and find my wife, who is standing by the cars in the cold with her phone against her ear, telling somebody in another time zone that the answer is no. And I stand next to her until she is done. 10 days, Vivian says. I say 9.5. She says, do not do that. Then she looks at my face for a second longer than she needs to and says, what did the girl want? I say absolution. Did you give it to her? She says. No, I say. She was not sorry for what she did to me. She is sorry that she was wrong about it, which is a different thing and costs a lot less. Vivian says, good, and then she seems annoyed at herself for saying it and gets in the car. I stand there for a second in the cold with a feeling in my chest that I have no business having. Kestrel courier drivers eat at 4 in the afternoon at a place on the harbor road with a green awning because a driver eats when the loading window closes, and everyone in this city knows that except the people who own the drivers. I know it because I used to bring sandwiches down to the loaders at the old yard, and because a clerk who never talks to drivers is a clerk who never finds out anything worth knowing. I tell Vivian I am going, and she says, I am coming. I say, they will not talk in front of a woman in a coat like that. She looks down at the coat. Then she goes upstairs and comes back in Owen's jacket. She is 31 years old. She runs a company with 400 employees, and she walks into a truck stop in a driver's jacket with the sleeves turned up twice and buys 40 coffees with 1 card. Every man in there turns around. She says, my husband wants to ask about a run from 2 years ago, and nobody has to talk to him, and the coffee is paid for either way, and then she sits down. I love her a bit at that exact moment. I do not tell her. I sit down with a man of about 60 named Sam Okoye, who has driven the 4th floor route for 11 years and who does remember me. Sandwich boy, he says. Egg and cress. I say, that was me. He says, they walked you out. I say, they did. He drinks his coffee, then he says, ask your question, and I ask it, and the room gets quiet around us. The harbor folder, I say. Spring, 2 years ago. 30-year lease, 9th pier. Yellow slip, 2 carbons. Sam Okoye puts down his cup and looks at the ceiling for a while, like a man doing arithmetic. That one went wrong, he says, and my heart starts going so hard I can feel it in my bandaged hand. Wrong how, I say. He says, I was told to pick up at 4 and take it to the Port Authority window. Then dispatch called me at the light on 9th and told me to hold, he says. Hand it to a car on the corner of Mercer. I said, that is not a delivery address. Dispatch said, do it. So I did it, and I did the other thing. What other thing, I say. Sam Okoye reaches into his jacket and takes out a wallet that is mostly rubber bands. Anytime a run goes wrong, he says, I keep my own carbon. 22 years. Never lost a job over it yet. Does not have that one on him, obviously. He has it at home in a shoebox with about 900 others, and he says he can find it in an evening if his wife has not thrown out the shoebox. I ask him what was on it. He says, the signature of whoever took it off me. I ask if he remembers. He says, a young man in a nice coat who signed with his left hand and had a courier shirt in his back seat. Ethan Ward writes with his left hand. I have watched him sign the check at 40 dinners with his hand curled over the top of the pen like a schoolboy hiding his homework from the boy next to him. In the car, I put my head back against the seat and let myself have 4 seconds of it. Then I sit up because a carbon is a carbon, and it proves that a folder went into a car, and it does not prove what came out. I say that out loud. Vivian says, explain. I say, the slip gives us Ethan. The slip does not give us page 9. The Port Authority does not accept a story. They accept a certified copy of the page with the stamp on it. So we still need the page, she says. Yes, I say, or a photograph of it taken by somebody the Port Authority will believe. And I sit there with my mouth open for a second, because I have just heard myself. Insurance, I say. Vivian says, what? I say, in the autumn 3 years ago, the underwriters did a survey of every leasehold we own, and they photographed the lease pages, because underwriters photograph everything. Which underwriter? She says. Coast and Harbor Mutual, I say, and the survey number was on the cover of the folder in green pen, and it started with the letter H, and I filed it myself on a Thursday. Vivian is already dialing. Tess, she says, get me the head of Coast and Harbor Mutual, and I do not care what he is eating. Then she hangs up and looks at me with something new in her face. You are enjoying this, she says. I say, I have not been useful to anybody for 2 years. Vivian says nothing for a while. Then she says, you were useful to me on the 7th of the month. I asked, and you said yes. Her phone rings before I can answer that. She looks at the screen and reads it twice, which she never does. Then she turns it so I can see, and the name on it is Desmond Halloran at 8 in the evening. She takes the call on speaker. A pleasant voice says, Mrs. Ashford, dinner tomorrow. Just the 2 of us and your new husband, who I hear is very good with paper. My office keeps a table at the Meridian at 8. Vivian says, why would I have dinner with you? And the pleasant voice says, because at 4 in the afternoon on the 2nd of January, I am going to own your pier, and I would rather buy your company at a fair price than a cheap one. The Meridian is on the 41st floor, and the lift makes my ears pop. Vivian ties my tie in that lift because I have done it 3 times, and it keeps coming out looking like a rope on a fence post. Rule for tonight, she says, with her hands under my chin. He will be charming. He will be generous. He will offer you something, and it will be the exact thing you want, because he has done his reading. I say, what do I do? She says, say thank you and put your hands in your lap. Then she flattens my collar with 2 fingers and does not step back as fast as she needs to, and the lift arrives. Desmond Halloran is about 60, and he stands up when we come in, which annoys me because I have been building a picture of a man in my head all day, and it does not match a man who stands up. He has a bottle of something old on the table, and he pours for me first, and I hear myself say, thank you like a boy at a school prize giving. And Vivian's face does not move a millimeter. He talks for 20 minutes about fairies. He is genuinely interesting about fairies. Then he lays it down between the plates, neat and flat, the way a man lays down a card he has been holding all evening. 900,000 a year, he says. That is what I have offered the Port Authority for the 9th pier in April, and they will take it, because a harbor is a public body, and public bodies like large numbers. Your freight runs through that pier, he says to Vivian. 61% of it. In April, you will be a company with 400 employees and nowhere to put a container. So let me make this pleasant. He slides a folded paper across. Vivian does not touch it. He says the number out loud anyway, because men like this always say it out loud. 80 million for the whole company, and your family keeps the name. Vivian says, the name is the only thing my family has that I did not build. Halloran smiles. Then he turns to me, and here it comes. And it is exactly the thing I want, because he has done his reading. Mr. Cole, he says, I have a legal and archives division, 200,000 a year, a title with the word director in it, and a 5-year contract that no in law can tear up over a fence. And, he says, the freehold on 11 Bell Street, I bought it in October, dry cleaner downstairs, phone shop now, your mother's building. It can be in your name on Friday, whatever else you decide tonight. The room goes a bit unreal. I can smell the lemon polish of my mother's counter. I can see her chalk marks on the door frame where she measured me, and I sit there with my hands in my lap like I was told. Then I say, that is a very kind offer, sir, Halloran says. But? And I say, no but. It is genuinely kind, and I am going to say no, and I would like to tell you why. Because you have been honest with me tonight. I say, you told the Port Authority 900,000 a year. That is a strong bid. Why are you buying a building on Bell Street, and a courier company, and a man's mother's papers if the bid is strong? Halloran's glass stops halfway. Vivian does not move at all. I keep going in the flat clerk voice, the one that used to read filing stamps out loud in an empty room at 7 in the morning. Because the bid is not strong, I say. Because there is a renewal option on that lease at 200,000 a year, and the Port Authority has to honor it if the letter arrives, and you know the rate. You said it earlier, I say. You said there is no renewal worth arguing about at 200,000. That rate is written in one place in the world, sir. Clause 4, page 9. The page that went missing. Nobody at that table says anything for about 4 seconds. Then Desmond Halloran laughs, a real one, from the stomach, and he raises his glass to me and says, Mrs. Ashford, you married an accountant. A clerk, I say. He says, worse. Then the charm comes off him like a coat, and what is underneath is a man doing arithmetic in his head while he smiles at me, and that is the frightening thing. I did not steal your page, he says. Vivian says, no, you bought a courier company and let a boy with a shirt and a girlfriend do it for a job that never came. Halloran shrugs one shoulder. He came to me. That sentence hangs over the table. He came to me. Not I found him. Not I hired him. He came to me in the spring 2 years ago in a nice coat with a page in an envelope and a price in his mouth. How much, I say. My voice comes out wrong. Halloran looks at me with something that is almost sympathy. He did not want money, he says. He wanted a place at a table. He asked for a job with the word senior in it. Did you give it to him? I say. Halloran says, no. I do not hire men who bring me the papers of the family they eat dinner with, and I told him so, and I kept the page, because I am not a fool. You have it, Vivian says, very quietly. Halloran says, I have a copy. He kept the original. He wanted leverage on me too. That boy is greedy in a way I find restful, because greedy men are easy to predict. Then he stands and puts on his coat and says the last thing, and he says it kindly, which is somehow worse than if he had snarled it. 8 days, Mrs. Ashford. 4 in the afternoon. My offer holds until then. In the lift going down, my ears pop again, and I hold on to the rail because my knees are doing something stupid. Vivian says, "You did that in front of a man who eats people for a living." I say, "I know. I feel sick." She says, "You refused a building. Your mother's building." I say, "If I take my mother's shop from a man who ate my life for a peer, I will have to walk past it every day for the rest of my life knowing what it cost." Vivian turns and looks up at me in the lift. Then she reaches up and pulls my terrible tie straight one more time and leaves her hand flat on my chest a second longer than the tie requires. "We will get you that building," she says. "We will get it with money you earned, and I will drive you there myself, and you can put your mother's name back on the awning in the letters she used." I do not trust my voice, so I say nothing. The lift reaches the ground, and the doors open, and Owen is standing there, and my wife takes her hand off my chest and walks out into the lobby first, as always. The insurance thread takes 2 days and ends in a wall. Coast and Harbor Mutual are very sorry. The survey exists. The photographs exist. The policyholder of record is the Ashford Family Trust, which means the request has to be signed by the trustee. And the trustee is an 84-year-old woman with a green book and a cane who has told me twice that she does not take mouths as evidence. I go up the hill on the morning of the 28th. Grandmother is in the garden in a coat, deadheading roses in December, which I am fairly sure is not a thing you do to roses in December. I put the request on the table with a pen. She does not look at it. She says, "Sit down and answer one question, and if you lie to me, I will know, because I have been listening to liars since before your father was born." "Why did you marry my daughter?" she says. "Because she asked me," I say. Grandmother says, "That is what happened. That is not why." And she waits, and the garden is cold, and I find that the true answer has been sitting in my mouth for weeks. Because for 2 years, I say, I have carried around a thing I know, and nobody wanted it. I loaded trucks for $16 an hour with a lease clause in my head and nowhere to put it down. She came to a storage yard and stood in the mud for 11 minutes and watched me work, I say. And then she said she needed the one thing about me that nobody else has ever wanted. I would have signed anything. Grandmother snips a rose. Then she says, "And now?" I say, "Now I would like her to keep me for something other than the clause." And then I stop because I have said more than I meant to say to an old woman with shears. She signs the request without reading it. Then she says, "The papers will take Coast and Harbor 10 working days to release. You have 5 days, so you had better already have a better idea than that one." I do have a better idea. It came to me at 4 in the morning, and it comes from a truck stop with a green awning, and it is this: working men keep their own copies. All of them, every trade. The surveyor who photographed those pages was a man named Prosper Ide. He signed the cover sheet in green pen. He was about 70 then. He did every leasehold survey on this harbor for 40 years. And he retired. Surveyors keep field books, I say to Vivian in the car, bound notebooks numbered with the date, and every photograph they take gets a frame number written down by hand. They keep them for their own defense. Vivian says, "And where is Prosper Ide?" Tess finds him in 90 minutes. He is 74, he lives in a bungalow with a garden full of tomato canes, and he answers the door with a hearing aid in one ear. He remembers the 9th pier. He remembers it because the wind that day took his hat into the water, and he had to buy another one at the ferry kiosk for $12, and his wife laughed at it for a year. He has 41 field books in a cupboard under the stairs in numbered order, and he takes down the right one in about 90 seconds, and I have to go and stand in his kitchen for a minute. Then, as I am standing in a stranger's kitchen with my hands on the counter breathing, my phone buzzes. It is a message from Ethan Ward. It is a photograph, and it takes me a second to understand it. It is a fireplace. In the fireplace, there is a cardboard box, half burned, and lying on top of the box, curling, going brown at the edge, is a school exercise book with a blue cover and my handwriting on it. Underneath the photograph, he has written, "Sorry, Uncle," and nothing else. My mother packed that box. Her writing is on the side of it, fragile, in marker pen, in her hand, and I watch it go brown on a screen. I go out into Prosper Ide's garden and stand between the tomato canes with the phone in my hand. It is cold. The canes have string on them, tied off in neat loops by a man who ties things off neatly. Then something comes up out of me that I have been sitting on for 3 years, and I put my hands on my knees in a stranger's vegetable patch and make a sound I have never made in front of anybody. None of this is about the page. The page is a copy of a copy, and I know 11 ways around it. It is a box with my mother's marker pen on the side, and it is in a fireplace on Kern Street, and he sent me a picture. Vivian comes out. She does not say anything soothing, which is why I can stand it. She stands next to me looking at the canes until I am done, and then she says, "Show me the photograph," and I show her. She looks at it for a long time. Then she says, "This is the first mistake he has made that cannot be argued about. Everything else is a story. This is a man setting fire to something and telling you he did it. Forward that to me," she says, "and to Hargrove, and to your grandmother, tonight on paper, printed in an envelope." She likes envelopes. I say, "Why?" Vivian says, "Because she is going to ask me for evidence in June." Then she puts her arms around me in a garden in December, while a 74-year-old surveyor pretends very hard to be busy at his kitchen window. And I put my face down on her shoulder, and I let her. Prosper ED comes out eventually with 2 mugs of tea and says, "When you are ready, son, there is something in the envelope in the back of the book, and you are going to want to sit down for it." Surveyors of his generation shot on film. Film came back from the lab as negatives and a contact sheet, and the contact sheet went into the field book in a glued envelope, and Prosper ED never threw one out. 41 frames of the 9th Pier lease. Frame 22 is page 9. The clause is there, the number 4 is there, the rate of $200,000 a year is there, and in the corner is the Port Authority stamp. And in the middle of that stamp, in ink, is the filing number, 9 letters and digits, and I read them out loud in a stranger's kitchen, and my voice does a thing on the last 3 that I am not proud of. Prosper. ID says he will swear anything anybody likes in front of anybody they want, and adds that his hat costs $12 and he has never been reimbursed, and I promise him a hat, and I mean it. Here is what we have now. A contact sheet with the filing number, taken by a licensed surveyor who will swear to it. That is enough for the Port Authority to pull their own microfilm and certify their own copy. We do not need Ethan Ward. We do not need Gregory's archive. We do not need the boxes in the fireplace. We need one clerk in a cardigan to press a button, and we need him to press it before 4 on the 2nd. I say all that to Vivian in the car, and I am grinning like an idiot, and she is smiling with her mouth shut, and we get about 9 minutes of being happy before Tess calls, and it stops. Tess says, "The Port Authority has logged a letter this morning concerning the 9th Pier." Vivian says, "From us." Tess says, "Yes, from an officer of the company, signed by Gregory Ashford, yard director." "Read it," Vivian says. Tess reads it. It is 4 lines long. It says that the company confirms it does not intend to exercise the renewal option on the 9th Pier and requests that the file be closed accordingly. I have never seen my wife go still like that. She does not swear. She says, "Thank you, Tess," and hangs up and puts both hands on the wheel of a car that Owen is driving, which is a thing to see. Then she says, "He cannot do that." And I say, "He can. He is a director of the company, and the Port Authority does not read our family tree. They have 2 letters, and they will honor the one with authority." "And how do they decide who has authority?" she says. And I say, "They ask for a board resolution." And she looks at me and says the number out loud. 12 directors. I have 5. Gregory has 4. And the trust has 22% and 3 seats, I say. And the trust has not voted in 11 years. Because your mother thinks voting is for people who cannot manage their own children. Vivian calls an emergency board meeting for the 30th of December at 9 in the morning. 12 people, 1 room, 1 line item, and 5 days on the clock, of which 1 is a holiday and 2 are a weekend. That night, I write everything down for grandmother by hand and put it in an envelope, because my wife says she likes envelopes, and because I have decided to do exactly what my wife says for a while. Put in the photograph of the fireplace, printed. I put in the picture of the boxes with the red and white tags. I put in 1 line about my mother's box, and I do not decorate it because it does not need it. I write, "In your garden you asked me to bring you paper. This is paper." And I write, "I am not asking you to vote for me. I am asking you to vote for the pier that pays for the house that holds your book." Owen drives it up the hill at 11 at night. He is back by midnight and says the housekeeper took it in and the light in the old lady's room stayed on. And I say, thank you, Owen. And he says, sir. On the 29th, Kestrel Courier terminates Samokoye after 22 years of service, citing a route irregularity in a shipment 2 years ago that he failed to report at the time. He calls me himself. He is not angry, which is worse. He says, they read me a sentence off a page, sandwich boy, and then a boy of 25 walked me to the door and would not look at my face. I say, Sam, I am going to fix this. He says, no you are not, and then, do not promise a man a thing you cannot do. That is worse than the thing itself. Then he says, I found the shoebox. Come and get your carbon. His wife has not thrown it out. It is under the bed with 900 others in rubber bands by year, and he has already found it, and it is on the kitchen table under a saucer, so the cat does not sit on it. Yellow. 2 carbons, 1 gone. Date, spring, 2 years ago. Item, 1 folder, and at the bottom, in the received box, a signature written by a man whose hand curls over the top of the pen, left to right and cramped. Ethan Ward in full, because he was young and vain and had not yet learned to sign things illegibly. Sam Okoye watches me look at it and says, 22 years I kept those. First one I ever needed. On the 30th at 9 in the morning, there are 12 directors in the boardroom and a jug of water nobody touches. Gregory has brought his own lawyer. Vivian has brought Hargrove and me and a folder. The 3 trust seats are empty. Everyone looks at them the way you look at a chair at a funeral. Vivian opens the meeting at 9 exactly and reads the item, and Gregory speaks first, and he is good today. He says the renewal is a fantasy. He says the page is lost, and the lawyers say the case is weak, and the Port Authority will not act on a photograph from a shoebox. He says his sister is gambling 400 jobs on a clerk. He says, and I ask you to look at where that clerk came from. And then he says my mother's shop, out loud, in a boardroom, the words dry cleaner used as an insult by a man in a suit that his sister paid for. 2 of his 4 laugh. That is the thing I take home with me. 2 men in that room laughed, and I wrote down which 2, and one of them is going to sell me his shares in April for less than he wants. Vivian says, are you finished? Gregory says he is. She says, then I will put it simply. The renewal is 200,000 a year. The market is 900,000. That difference is 700,000 a year. Over 30 years, she says. That difference is $21 million, and my brother has written a letter to give it away for nothing, without a resolution, before this board had met once. Then, the door opens at 11 minutes past 9, and Margaret Ashford comes in on her cane with the green book under her arm and the housekeeper carrying a chair that she does not use. 11 years, and she walks in and sits in the middle empty seat and puts the book on the table in front of her and says, good morning. Nobody says good morning back. Gregory says, Mother, this is a board matter. Grandmother says, I hold 3 seats and 22%, and I have read the papers. And she taps the envelope on the table, my envelope, opened with my handwriting on it. And Gregory sees it and understands. She votes with Vivian. That is 8 against 4, and the resolution passes. And it says that the company confirms its intention to exercise the renewal option and that the letter of the 29th is withdrawn. Gregory sits through the rest of it with his hands flat on the table. At the end, as the room empties, Grandmother stops beside his chair and says one sentence that I hear because I am collecting the folders. She says, I have watched you want this since you were 44, and today you put it in writing that you would rather have my daughter's chair than her company. Then she goes out and does not look back. Outside in the corridor, Camille is waiting. She has no seat in that room and never will. She is standing by the lifts in a coat with her hands pulled up into her sleeves, like a girl waiting outside a headmaster's office. He has it, she says. A bandajabaj pasagin, the real one. He keeps it in a bank box on 9th Street, and he told me the number of the box in October when he was drunk and wanted me to know he was clever. Why are you telling me, I say? Camille says, because he sent you a photograph of a fire, and I saw it, and I sat in a room with him afterwards while he ate a sandwich, and she stops there, and that is enough. That afternoon, Ethan Ward calls my wife's office and asks for a meeting and says, tell her I am bringing page 9, and I would like to discuss what it is worth. And Tess writes it down word for word. Ethan comes at 4 in the afternoon on the 31st of December into a glass room on the 9th floor with a leather folder under his arm and a good coat and the walk of a man arriving at a negotiation. Vivian is at the head of the table, Hargrove is on her left. I am at the far end with a cardboard document box in front of me, and Tess is by the door with a laptop open, taking every word down. Ethan sits without being asked and puts the folder on the table and puts one hand flat on it. Then he says, "Before we start, I would like to say that none of this was ever personal," and I nearly laugh. He talks for 4 minutes. He has page 9, the original with the wet stamp, not a photograph. Without it, the Port Authority will not move, and he is willing to be reasonable. And here is reasonable. Directorship, he says, 3 years minimum, $250,000 a year. And the engagement stands, which means the family accepts him, which means nobody ever asks about a courier shirt again. He finishes. He looks at Vivian. Vivian looks at me and gives the smallest nod I have ever been given, and hands me the room the way you hand somebody a tool you know they already own. I say, "May I see the page?" He says, "No." I say, "That is fine," and I open the box and I take out the first thing and I slide it down the table to him, face up, so he has to look at it while he talks. It is a contact sheet, I say. 41 frames, shot by Prosper Ide, licensed surveyor in the autumn 3 years ago for Coast and Harbor Mutual. Frame 22 is your page. Clause 4 is legible. Then I slide the second thing, and this, I say, is his sworn affidavit, signed yesterday at a solicitor's office on Marsh Street, along with the field book number and the negative, which he still has. You know what a filing number is, I say. It is the number the Port Authority gives its own record. I do not need your page. I need their microfilm. Frame 22 gives me their number in their own ink. Ethan's hand is still flat on the folder. He says, "The Port Authority will not act on a photograph." I say, "They will not have to. They will act on their own file, which has been sitting in their own basement for years." Then I slide the third thing, and this one I do slowly, because I have earned it and because I am not a saint. Yellow paper, 2 carbons, 1 missing. Kestrel Courier, spring. 2 years ago. Sam Okoye kept it, I say, 22 years of keeping his own copies, and Kestrel fired him on the 29th for a route irregularity, which is a phrase somebody wrote after somebody else made a phone call. That is your signature, I say. Left-handed, full name, no flourish. You were 25. You took a folder out of a courier van on the corner of Mercer, and 11 days later, Delia Fenn was told to clear my desk. The room is very quiet. Tess has stopped typing, which I notice, and then she starts again, faster. Ethan looks at the 3 pieces of paper in front of him for what feels like a long time. Then he says, "Adrian, we were friends." And there it is, the last card in his hand, and he plays it the way he plays everything, softly, with his eyes up, the way he used to play it on my mother in her shop. I say, "We were." He says, 6 years. I say, "And I would have given you anything you asked for. You did not have to take the drawer code. You did not have to take the girl. You could have just asked me for help." I say, "I would have driven you anywhere. I lent you $4,000 for your father's operation and never asked for a cent and never told anybody, and you sat in my mother's kitchen and ate her soup." Ethan says nothing. That is the whole answer, and everyone in the room hears it. Vivian says, "Mr. Ward, you are trespassing on my 9th floor, and I would like you to leave before I make it a police matter." He stands up. He takes his folder. At the door, he turns around, and he has one more thing, and I can see him deciding to spend it. He says, "You have 48 hours and the record office is shut for the holiday." He is right about that, and he is very nearly right about the rest. Because at 9 the next morning, on the 1st of January, a complaint arrives at the Port Authority alleging that a submitted photograph is fabricated. It is signed by nobody. It is a form on their website. It takes 6 seconds to file, and it puts a verification hold on a record request, and the hold sits there like a stone in a doorway for 3 working days. We find out at 10 in the morning on the 2nd of January, standing at the counter, from a man of about 60 in a gray cardigan, whose name, it says on the little brass thing, is Mr. Fowler. I have seen Mr. Fowler 11 times in my life. He does not remember me. He tells us, with the calm of a man who has said it 4,000 times, that a hold is a hold and the office closes at 4. Vivian says, "Who lifts the hold?" He says, "The record supervisor." Vivian says, "May we speak to the record supervisor?" He says the record supervisor is on leave until Monday, and our peer dies at 4 this afternoon. I stand there, and I make myself do the thing I do, which is to stop looking at the people and start looking at the paper. There is a laminated sheet screwed to the counter. There has been one there for 11 years. It is the Port Authority tariff schedule. I have paid off that sheet with company checks about 90 times. Search fee, $12. Certified copy, $35. Expedited same-day retrieval, $180. Mr. Fowler, I say. Item 9 on your own tariff. Expedited same-day retrieval, $180. Same day, it says. What is the rule that lets your office do a same-day retrieval? He looks at the sheet as if it has appeared overnight. Then he says, that is for retrieval. Yes, I say. And a verification hold is on the request. The retrieval is of your own microfilm, held by you, filed by you. I say it very carefully, because everything now sits on one distinction, and I have exactly one chance to say it right. Nobody is asking you to believe my photograph. I am asking you to look in your own drawer. I put the contact sheet on the counter. Frame 22, I say, your stamp, your ink, your filing number, 9 characters. Pull the microfilm for that number and read what is on it. If I am lying, you will see it in 4 minutes. Mr. Fowler looks at the number. Then he does something I will be grateful for until I die. He puts on a second pair of glasses from a drawer, reads the number out loud, and says, that is one of ours. Eyes gas da. Lintre boy. He consensus $180, card or cash, and Vivian reaches for her card, and I put my hand out and stop her, and I take out my wallet, and I count it out on the counter in 20s, 9 20s, from $1,200 in a bank account in my own name, which is every single thing I own in the world, under Clause 4 of a marriage contract that I signed with a steady hand. Mr. Fowler writes a receipt. Adrian Cole, $180, item 9. Sans expedited retrieval. It is the best purchase of my life, and I would like it framed. Then he says, wait over there. He is gone for 40 minutes. Vivian sits next to me on a plastic bench in a corridor that smells of wet paper, in a coat worth more than the building, and neither of us says one word the entire time. At 10 to 12, Mr. Fowler comes back with a reel and a printout, and puts it on the counter. Page 9, he says, Clause 4. Renewal at $200,000 per annum. Letter to be received 90 days prior. He says, would you like it certified? $35. I say yes and pay him, and he stamps it twice and signs across the stamp. And then he says the sentence that ends 2 years of my life. He says, was there anything else? And Vivian Ashford, chief executive of a company with 400 employees, laughs out loud in a government corridor and has to turn around and face the wall for a moment. Letter of renewal has been sitting in Hargrove's bag since Tuesday. It needs the certified copy attached, and the board resolution attached, and the signature of the chief executive on the front page. She signs it at the counter at 7 minutes past 12 on the 2nd of January, standing up, using a pen she borrows from a man in a cardigan, and puts in her own pocket without noticing. Mr. Fowler date stamps it. He writes it into a book, in pen, by hand, and turns the book around so we can both see the line. And the line has our name on it, and the 9th pier, and the date, and the time. Then he tears off the receipt copy and gives it to me and says, Happy New Year, and calls the next person in the queue, because to him, this was a Tuesday morning and item 9 on a laminated sheet. We walk out onto the harbor road. It is cold and gray, and there is a container ship going out with 2 tugs on it, and I stand on the steps and hold a piece of paper and cannot make my legs go down the steps. Sam Okoye is parked across the road on a double yellow line in his own van, because he drove prosper-eyed and the affidavit across town this morning for nothing and refused to be paid for it. He gets out and leans on the door and says, well, and I hold up the receipt, and Sam Okoye, 62 years old, fired after 22 years by a phone call, punches the air in the middle of the harbor road. I go over and I say, Sam, on Monday you come and see my wife. He says, I told you not to promise. I say, I am not promising you a favor. Our courier contract is worth $400,000 a year, and it is up in March. Vivian says, from behind me, 440, and Kestrel will not be tendering. Sam Okoye looks at her, then at me. Then he says, I have a brother with 2 vans, and then he cannot talk for a second. That afternoon, Desmond Halloran calls my wife, and she puts it on speaker in the car. He says, well done. He sounds like a man who has lost $11 million and is annoyed at the weather. Then he says, you may as well know. Your boy came to me again on the 31st at 9 at night and offered me the page for a job. I told him what I told him 2 years ago, and I said it louder. And then he says the last thing, the thing that makes Vivian put down her phone and look out of the window for a long moment. He says, "Mrs. Ashford, when your mother writes in that book of hers in June, tell her Desmond sends his regards, and tell her I said the boy is hers now." That night, Mr. Bell puts 2 glasses on a tray without being asked, and Dorothy makes a thing with beef in it that takes 6 hours, and Owen has the evening off and stays anyway and eats in the kitchen. Vivian and I end up on the balcony that I once called a waste of space, in coats, with the harbor lights down the hill, and I can see the crane on the 9th pier from here, which I have never noticed before. She says, "I am going to have Hargrove tear up clause 4. I say no. She turns her head. I say, leave it exactly where it is. I like knowing that everything in this house belongs to you, and I am here anyway. Then I say the other thing, which I have been carrying around since a lift on the 41st floor. I say, we have been married for 4 weeks, and we have never once had dinner in a place I chose." Vivian says, "You choose terrible places." I say, "I choose a place on Farrar Street where they do a chicken thing for $19 and the man behind the counter shouts at his son all evening. It is very good." She says, "Thursday." I say, "Thursday." Then neither of us says anything for a while, and the wind comes up off the water, and she moves about 4 inches closer, which in this family is a declaration. I say, "I am going to kiss you." And I say it out loud like a fool, because I have never done this without a contract in the room. Vivian says, "You are talking about it instead of doing it," and so I stop talking. The archive on the North Yard gets opened on the 6th of January under grandmother's seal by 2 accountants and a solicitor, and they inventory 11 boxes and 41 filing drawers over 9 days. The courier books are gone, 9 boxes of them burned in a barrel, which is an offense under the Records Act with a fine of up to $50,000 and a director disqualification attached to it. What the accountants find in drawer 30 is worse, and it has nothing to do with me. For 6 years, the North Yard has been renting its own overflow land to a haulage company at $11,000 a month. The haulage company has one director, a woman in another city, who turns out to be Gregory Ashford's wife's sister. 6 years at $11,000 a month is $792,000. He did not need his sister's chair to be rich, I say, when Hargrove reads it out. He needed her chair so that nobody would ever open drawer 30. And Vivian says, and now everybody has read drawer 30. Gregory resigns from the board on the 11th of January in a letter of 1 paragraph. The family does not report him because grandmother says a family that calls the police on its own son is a family with no other tools. Instead, she uses the tools she has. His seat at the summer banquet moves from the elder table to the 3rd table, which in this house is a public sentence. And every person in this city who matters will see it. Ethan Ward does not resign from anything because Ethan Ward has nothing to resign from. What he has is an engagement entered in a green book on the 2nd of December, and that is now the only roof he owns. He starts calling Camille 11 times a day. He sends flowers to the house on the hill. He tells 3 separate people that the whole business was a misunderstanding about a courier shirt from college. And on a Wednesday in February, he sits in a coffee place on Marsh Street across from Camille Ashford and says, quietly, that if she breaks the engagement, he will tell her family how he got the drawer code. I do not know any of that yet. What I know is that in February, my wife takes me to the chicken place on Farrar Street, and the man behind the counter shouts at his son the whole evening, and she loves it. I know that on the 16th of February, I am made director of contracts at $95,000 a year, and that the announcement goes out to the whole company at 9 in the morning. By 9:30, there are 11 emails in my inbox from people who stood at their desks 2 years ago and watched 2 security men walk me out of that building with a box in my arms. I answer every one of them politely. I keep the list. My mother used to say that the ones who are nice to you when you are nothing are the only reference you will ever need, and she never wrote it down anywhere. I know that on the 22nd of February, Delia Fenn is given her name back in a letter from the company that says, in writing, that no employee was responsible for the Kestrel bid and that the record is corrected. She comes to my office to say thank you and cries in a chair for 4 minutes. I let her, then I say, Delia, say it on the day when saying it costs you something. She says, I know. Then she says, on the day I was frightened, and I know that too. I know that on the 2nd of March, Sam Okoye and his brother sign a courier contract for $440,000 a year, and that Sam turns up to sign it in a tie, and his wife takes a photograph. And I know that on the 4th of March, my wife drives me to Bell Street herself with the deeds in a folder because Desmond Halloran sold the freehold back at what he paid, out of what I can only call professional courtesy. The phone shop is on a lease until June. The awning is plastic, but we stand on the pavement in the cold and Vivian says, letters. I say, cream on green, and the name in full because she hated being called Sadie. Then I go up to Elmridge with a cloth and a bottle of water, and I do the stone, which I have been doing badly for 3 years with the wrong cloth. Vivian comes. She stands about 4 steps back with her hands in her pockets. I say the numbers to my mother because they are the only love letter I know how to write. 19 years in the shop, $80 a month on the stone, $440,000 for Sam, $12 for a hat. On the way down the hill, Vivian says, you talk to her in numbers. I say, she was a woman who ran a shop for 19 years on a margin of 9% and never once got a number wrong. Vivian says, I would have liked her. I say, she would have been terrified of you for about a week, and then she would have started sending you home with soup, and Vivian is quiet for the rest of the drive. Nina turns 18 in March. She asks for exactly one thing for her birthday, which is to be allowed to sit at the second table instead of the third. And grandmother says no, and Nina says it was worth a try. Then she says to me, in the kitchen, with her mouth full, my dad has not spoken to me since December. And I say, that is his failure. And she says, I know. And then she says, it still feels like mine. I say, when I was 17, my mother worked a shop for 6 days a week, and I was ashamed of the smell of the chemicals on her coat. And I have carried that for 9 years, and she never knew. And it still counts. Nina looks at me for a second and then says, Uncle, that was very heavy for a Tuesday, and eats another piece of bread, and I laugh so hard that Dorothy comes in to see what has happened in her kitchen. On the 9th of April, the Port Authority confirms the renewal of the 9th Pier for a further 30 years at $200,000 per annum in a letter of 2 paragraphs with a stamp. Vivian pins it to the wall in the boardroom. 12 directors, 8 of them the ones who voted, and 2 of them the ones who laughed in December when a man said dry cleaner out loud in a suit his sister paid for. One of those 2 comes to my office in the last week of April and offers to sell me his shares. I buy them at a price we both know is generous to me. It is the first thing I have ever owned that has a vote attached. Then it is May, and the summer banquet is on the 14th of June, and the whole family starts doing what this family does before a banquet, which is arithmetic about seating dressed up as concern about food. And on the 2nd of June, Camille Ashford comes to Bell Street at 7 in the evening, where I am standing in an empty shop with a tape measure, and she stands in the doorway and cannot come in. I gave him the code, she says. She says it before hello. She has clearly been holding it in her mouth the entire way here in a taxi. Then she puts her hand over her mouth like she can push it back in, and it is far too late for that. I put the tape measure down on the counter my mother used for 19 years. I say it properly. Camille says, in October, 3 years ago, I came to your floor to bring you lunch and you were in a meeting. Ethan was with me, she says. He said he wanted to leave something in the harbor file for you as a surprise because you were always in that file. And he said Delia keeps the codes in her drawer on a card. So I opened her drawer, she says. I read the card and I said the numbers out loud to him in the corridor, and I did not even write them down because it was nothing. Because it was 4 numbers, because it was a surprise. 5 months later, they walked you out of that building, she says, and I stood at my window on the 6th floor and watched them do it, and I did not think about the drawer once. Not once. Not for 2 years. I ask when she did think about it. She says, in December, in the long room, when Delia said 3 people had the code, and you were not one of them. And then she says, and I sat there, and I said nothing again. Why now, I say. Camille says, because he told me in February that if I ended it, he would tell you, and I have spent 4 months being married to that sentence, and I would rather you heard it from my mouth. I stand in my mother's empty shop and look at the girl I was going to marry, and I wait for the hot thing to come up in my chest, and what comes instead is so flat and so tired that it frightens me. I say, do you want me to tell you it is all right? She says no. I say good because it is not. And it is going to be true for the rest of your life that 4 numbers you said in a corridor cost me 3 years. Then I tell her the only thing I have that is worth anything to her. I say, on the 14th of June, there will be 82 people in that hall, and you are going to stand up and say all of that out loud. Camille says, my father will never forgive me. I say, your father moved his own seat to the third table by himself and did not need any help from you. She says, grandmother will strike me out of the book. Maybe, I say. But you will have said it in front of witnesses, at a table where a right is the only thing anybody respects, and in this family that is the only kind of apology that has ever been worth a cup of tea. The 14th of June is hot. The house on the hill has all its doors open, and the garden smells of cut grass, and there are 82 chairs again, and the little brass clock is already on the sideboard. I get dressed in a room with a window over the water. Mr. Bell ties my tie because I have made my peace with the fact that I cannot, and he does it in 9 seconds and steps back like a man diffusing something. Then Vivian comes in with a small box and says, hold out your keys. I hand her my key ring, which has 4 keys on it and a bottle opener, and she puts a new brass key on it and hands it back. 11 Bell Street, she says. The phone shop moved out on the 2nd. The locksmith cut it on Tuesday, and I have had it in my bag for 9 days, waiting for a moment when you would not cry in front of staff. I look at a new key on the ring that used to hold my mother's keys until they went through the bottom of a wet cardboard box on the airport road, and I stand there with it in my hand for a while. Mr. Bell has developed an extremely urgent interest in the curtains. Vivian says, well, that plan failed, and hands me a handkerchief, and I say something about the light in here and use it. We go down at 10 to 7. The hall is full. There are 3 tables, and the seating cards went out 11 days ago, and half this city has already discussed them over the phone because that is what the cards are for. Gregory Ashford is at the 3rd table by the door, between a second cousin and a wine importer, and he has been there for 20 minutes, making conversation like a man who has decided to survive the evening. I do not gloat. I want to. I look at him and I think about a girl by a way station being called a liar by her own father, and the wanting goes out of me and leaves something heavier behind. Nina is at the 2nd table because grandmother moved her there in May and told nobody it was a birthday present. She waves at me with her whole arm, against about 9 house rules, and the cane does not tap. Ethan Ward arrives at 5 to 7 with Camille. I knew sights at the Sakamori fights, on time, in a new suit, and he walks in like a man walking into a place he has every right to be, because on the 2nd of December, a book said he did. He greets 3 of the great aunts. He kisses one of them on the hand. He is charming, and there is a small circle of laughter around him within 4 minutes. And I sit at the elder table and let him have it. Vivian beside me says under her breath, he thinks the book will hold. I say, the book will hold exactly as long as your mother wants it to. Vivian says she has had a pen in her pocket since Thursday. At 7 exactly, grandmother starts the brass clock and says the words she says twice a year, and the tea rite begins, and the pot goes down the elder table by rank the way it has for 4 generations. Ethan is junior. Ethan pours. He comes up the room the way he did in December, and this time he is smiling, and this time his hand is steady, because he has had 6 months to practice being fine. He fills my cup without spilling a drop. Then he says it clearly so the hall can hear how easy it is for him. Uncle, please accept the tea. And he even manages to make the words sound like a joke we share. I say thank you, and I take it with both hands, and I drink it, and I am not enjoying myself at all, and that surprises me. 6 months ago, this was the only thing I wanted. Today, it is a man pouring tea. Then grandmother says, stay there. Ethan stops. She opens the green book on the table in front of her and turns it to the page for December and lays it flat with the palm of her hand. She reads out loud. Engagement entered the 2nd of December. Camille Ashford and Ethan Ward, witnessed by me. Then she takes a pen out of her pocket and the hall goes so quiet I can hear the clock. She draws 1 line through it. 1. Slow, with a ruler, because she is a woman who would use a ruler in an earthquake, and then she signs the margin and writes the date beside it in her small, hard hand. Struck, she says. And Ethan Ward is standing in the middle of the hall, holding a teapot with both hands, while an old woman crosses him out of the only family he has ever been able to get into. He says, on what grounds? Which is the wrong sentence, and I watch him hear it come out of his own mouth. Grandmother says, on the grounds of a photograph of a fireplace and a boy who signed a yellow slip. Then she says the rest of it evenly, without heat, which is far worse. You took a page out of a folder for a job you did not get. You bought a dead woman's boxes and burned them and sent the picture to her son. Ethan puts the pot down on the table because his hands have started to go. Then he does the thing that people always do in this hall, which is to look for one face that will let him keep standing. He looks at Camille. And Camille Ashford stands up before he can say her name, and she does not look at him at all, and she says, "Grandmother, I have something to say, and I would like to say it now." Grandmother says, "You are junior at this table, and you are pouring tonight." Camille says, "I know. I will pour. I would like to say it first, and then I will pour for every person in this room." She is shaking. Anyone can see it from anywhere in that hall. She puts both hands flat on the tablecloth, the way you do when the floor is moving, and she starts, and she does not stop once. 3 years ago in October, I went to the 4th floor with lunch, she says. Adrian was in a meeting. Ethan told me he wanted to leave a surprise in the harbor file and that the drawer codes were on a card in Delia Fenn's desk. I opened her drawer, she says. I read the card. I said 4 numbers out loud in the corridor. 5 months later, they walked Adrian out of that building with a box, and I stood at a window on the 6th floor and watched. Somebody at the second table says something, and grandmother taps the cane once, and the somebody stops. Camille keeps going, and her voice cracks on the middle of it, and she keeps going anyway. I did not think about the drawer, she says. Not that day, not that year. In November, I left him on the airport road in the rain because it was easier than being wrong about the person I had helped. And in December, in this house, when Delia Fenn stood in that doorway and said 3 people had that code and Adrian was never one of them, she says, I sat in that chair and I said nothing again. Then she says the last piece, and she says it to the room and not to me, which is the only reason I believe it. And in February, he told me that if I ended it, he would tell you all how he got the code. So I have been engaged since February to a man I am afraid of, she says, in order to keep 4 numbers quiet, and I would rather stand here in front of all of you than do 1 more month of that. The hall does not make a sound. Ethan Ward says her name once, quietly, the way you call a dog that has slipped its lead in traffic, and 82 people hear exactly what is in it, and that is the end of him. Gregory Ashford is at the 3rd table by the door with his hand over his mouth. Whatever else that man is, he is a father, listening to his daughter say she has been frightened since February. Grandmother closes the book. She says, Camille. Camille says, yes. Grandmother says, do you understand that you handed the key of this family to a stranger? Camille says, yes. Grandmother says, and I would like to be struck out, Camille says. Write the line. I will take it. And she stands there with her chin up in front of 100 years of people who never say anything true at this table. I hear myself say no. Every head at the elder table turns. Vivian's hand comes onto my wrist under the table, and she is not stopping me. She is holding on, and I put my hand over hers, and I stand up in front of my mother-in-law. I say, if you strike her out, she stops being family, and everything she just said in front of 82 people stops costing her anything at 9 tomorrow morning. Let her stay in and let her pay. I say, she gave a stranger 4 numbers in a corridor because she was in love and stupid, and she has just said so out loud at the only table where saying it out loud costs anything. That is worth something. Then I say the thing I have been holding since that empty shop on Bell Street. I say I have not forgiven her, and I may not, and that is my business. But this family took 2 years off my life for a thing I did not do. If we throw out the only person in it who ever stood up and said what she actually did, I say, then this hall is exactly what my mother thought it was when she pressed my shirts for the first dinner I came to. Grandmother looks at me for a long time. Then she says, sit down, boy. And then she says to the hall, the line stays. Camille Ashford remains in the book at the foot of her generation, and she serves tonight. Camille sits down and puts her face in her hands. Nina, who is 18 now and has no fear of anything, gets up from the second table, walks the length of the hall, and sits down next to her sister. And Ethan Ward, who has been standing beside a teapot in the middle of a hall for 11 minutes with nowhere in the world to go, finally says the one true thing he has ever said to me. You had a mother with a shop, he says. You had $4,000 to lend a friend. Do you know what I had? And I say, yes, I do. You had a room in my house any night you wanted it, for 6 years. Mr. Bell walks Ethan Ward out. He does it the way he does everything, with both hands and no expression. And at the door he says, "Your coat, sir," and gives it to him, and closes the door behind him. Later, I find out that Ethan stood on the drive for 11 minutes, waiting for a taxi with 82 people visible through the windows behind him, and that not one of them came out. I do not enjoy it as much as I expected. The right is at 4 minutes and the pot has stopped in the middle of the room. So grandmother restarts the brass clock and says, "The table is waiting," and the whole hall exhales and comes back to life. Camille pours. She starts at the head of the elder table and works down, and it takes a long time, and her hand is steady by the fourth cup, which is a thing about her I had forgotten I admired. When she reaches me, she stops. 82 people watch a girl in a green dress stand beside my chair with a pot in both hands for the second time in 6 months, and this time nobody in that hall is enjoying it. "Uncle," she says, "please accept the tea." Her voice does not do anything clever. She pours it properly, at the right angle, with the lid held, the way she was taught when she was 9 years old. "Thank you," I say. I take it with both hands, and there it is. The words I have been walking towards since a rainy night on the airport road take about 2 seconds, and then the pot moves on. I sit there with a warm cup, and I wait to feel the enormous thing, and the enormous thing does not come. What comes is my wife's hand under the table, flat over mine, and the smell of cut grass through an open door. The rite finishes at 10 minutes and 50 seconds. Grandmother stops the clock with one finger and says, "The table is fed, the ranks are kept," and then she stops before the last of it, and everyone notices. Instead, she says, "Bring me the book." 2 of the great aunts sit up. The housekeeper brings the green book and sets it in front of her with the pen, and grandmother turns to the last page of the year. "There is a line at the bottom of every year," she says, to the hall, in the voice of a woman reading a rule she did not write. "It is for whoever paid the family's largest debt that year. It has been empty for 6 years. She says, "In January, this family nearly gave away a lease worth $21 million over its term, and the person who stopped it is sitting at this table, and he paid $180 of his own money at a government counter to do it." And she writes, it takes about 9 seconds, Adrian Cole in her small hard hand on the line that has been blank since before I ever came to this house with pressed shirts and a bunch of flowers. She turns the book around so the elder table can see it, and then she reads the rule that goes with the line, which I have known about since December and have never once heard said out loud in a room. "Whoever stands on that line," she says, "is senior at this table to every soul below it, and every soul below it serves the year's banquet, not the staff, the family. That is how it was written, and that is how it is done." The junior row stands up, 19 of them, cousins, nephews, 2 men in their 40s who have not carried a plate since school, and Camille at the foot of her generation, and they go to the sideboard for the pots. Gregory Ashford stands up at the third table. Nobody asked him to, and nobody would have dared. He is 53, he sat on this board in January, and he is below that line now, and he picks up a pot. He starts at the far end of his own table and works along it, and the wine importer beside him does not know where to look, and the whole hall watches a big man pour tea for a second cousin. When he gets to me, he does not say uncle, because he is older than me, and the right does not ask for it. He says my name, Adrian. He pours. His hand is not steady, and the tea goes to the right level anyway. Then he says very quietly, so only I hear it, "Thank you for what you said about my daughter." And I say, "You should be saying it to her." And he says, "I know," and goes on to the next chair. He does say it to her, not that night. On the 29th of June, in a car outside her flat, badly and for a long time, and Nina tells me every word of it 3 days later with her mouth full, as usual. Grandmother says, "Adrian, ask." I say, "Ask for what?" She says, "The line comes with a claim on this family. Everyone who has ever stood on it has asked for something. Your father-in-law asked for a boat." The hall laughs. I stand up, and I have known what I want since a kitchen in a bungalow full of tomato canes, and it has nothing to do with a chair or a yard or a percentage of anything. I say, "Write it in the book." She says, "Write what?" I say, "Write that on the 9th of March, 2 years ago, a clerk named Adrian Cole was walked out of this family's building for a leak he did not do." "Write who told them to do it," I say. "Write that Delia Fenn ran that room for 19 years and that she said the true thing in December in front of you. Write that a driver named Sam Okoye kept his own carbon for 22 years. Write that the pier was saved by a surveyor of 74 who kept 41 field books under his stairs, I say, and by a man in a cardigan at a public counter who put on a second pair of glasses. Because in 50 years, I say, somebody in this family is going to open that book looking for who owned what, and they should find out that it was not the people at the elder table who saved the ninth pier. It was the ones who kept their own copies, I say. Every trade does it. Drivers, surveyors, clerks. They keep a carbon because nobody powerful has ever once come back to check whether they were treated fairly. Grandmother writes for a long time. Nobody eats. Then she puts the pen down and says, "Is that all?" And I say, "No." And I say the small one, the one I have been carrying since a bungalow garden. I say, Prosper-eyed lost a hat in the harbor doing this survey. $12 at the ferry kiosk. He has never been reimbursed. Grandmother says, then the Ashford family will buy the man a hat. And the hall laughs again. Later, out on the terrace with the lights on in the garden, Vivian finds me sitting on the wall with my jacket off, and she sits down next to me and puts a glass in my hand that I do not drink. She says, "You gave away a claim on this family for a paragraph in a book." I say, "Paper outlives everybody in that hall, including you and me." She says, "That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me." Then she takes something out of her pocket. It is a small flat box, and inside it are two plain rings, one large and one small, and neither of them is expensive, and she looks at them instead of me. "We did it in a county office on Senate Street with 2 clerks, she says. "I asked you for a witness, and you asked me for nothing, and I let you sign a paper that gives you nothing. And I have thought about that every day since December." "Adrian," she says, and then she stops, because she is a woman who negotiates for a living and she does not have a sentence for this, and I watch her look for one and fail, and it is the best thing I have ever seen. I take the small ring out of the box and I hold it up and I say, "Vivian Ashford, I am worth $1,200 and a shop on Bell Street, and my mother would have made you carry soup home in a bag. Marry me again," I say, "in front of all these people, in a hall where the tea is poured by rank, and put it in your mother's book in ink. And if you ever want out, you can have every penny of it and the shop as well." She says yes before I finish the sentence, in the flat voice she uses for board resolutions, and then she laughs, and then she puts her forehead against my shoulder and stays there for a while. We go back in at 11. The hall is loud. Somebody has put music on, which never happens, and 2 of the great aunts are dancing badly, and Nina is teaching their little brother to do something with a napkin. Delia Fenn is at the second table with a glass of wine and a name that belongs to her again. Sam Okoye came in a tie with his wife, and he has been talking to Owen about vans for 40 minutes. Prosper Ide is sitting next to Grandmother, telling her about drainage on the South Quay in 1991, and Grandmother is listening to him properly, with her cane hooked on the back of her chair. I sit down at the elder table in the 3rd chair. Camille comes past with a pot at the end of the night and stops, and she says, "Uncle, one more," and I say yes, and she pours the last cup of the evening. And Vivian Ashford, who signs every check this family cashes, reaches over without looking up from the man she is talking to, puts 2 fingers on my wrist, and presses my hand flat to the table. "Sit like you own the chair," she says.
So that is the story of a clerk who kept his own copies. He did not get his life back by shouting at the people who took it. He got it back by remembering one number and paying $180 at a public counter. Watch what he does with the family rules along the way. The same right that made the girl who humiliated him pour his tea is the right that put his name in the book. Because rules are only ever as good as who is holding the pen. And notice the people he pays back at the end. A driver, a surveyor, a woman who was frightened once and told the truth late. Those are the people who actually save you, and almost nobody bothers to write their names down anywhere.